This is Max Payne. No, seriously. I mean, it looks like they took a constipated looking JPEG of series creator Sam Lake and just stretched it over a janky character model. And somehow, apparently, this game is supposed to be good. This gritty vigilante tale came out in 2001 amongst some of the best games you can even think of. Grand Theft Auto 3, Super Smash Bros. Melee, Metal Gear Solid 2, Silent Hill 2, Conker's Bad Fur Day? And yet, Remedy's Max Payne was able to still shine through, spawning 2 sequels, a movie, and even getting the green light for a modern remake. Not to mention that the developers, Remedy themselves, have been able to build off of the Max Payne legacy and release games like Alan Wake and Control. So what is it that makes this game so great in the eyes of so many? Dr. Pooplove here, and as someone who has never played this game, I needed to see for myself. So today, I'm going to be playing and reviewing 2001's Max Payne. I will critique the story, the characters, and the gameplay, and highlight the best and worst parts about this game, before ultimately deciding where it ranks on my ultimate video game tier list. Starting, well, from the very beginning. Or is it the end?
Standby 1010, investigated reported disturbance at Acer Plaza.
10-4 dispatcher, verify address.
It's Acer Plaza, repeat, Acer Plaza.
Shots fired on the rooftop. An assault in progress at Acer Plaza. Repeat, an assault in progress.
The game starts in the most cinematic and badass way possible. The New York skyline is seen, and we are hearing police chatter on the radio about a violent assault in progress. The camera pans up a skyscraper to show the badass Max Payne on top of a roof, narrating that it was all over.
All units, emergency. Officer in danger, Acer Plaza, repeat, Acer Plaza, all units.
They were all dead. The final gunshot was an exclamation mark to everything that had led to this point. I released my finger from the trigger, and then it was over.
What exactly was over, we don't know, because without giving us any more context, we are whisked away to the past. Now, this intro is powerful because it creates intrigue, and now I want to know how we're going to get there and what exactly is happening. But back to the past, and Max Payne was a straight and narrow police officer with a family. He had a good life. He was living the American dream back when that used to be possible. Now one day, Max gets home and there is screaming and there are intruders, and he has to rush upstairs to find out what's going on. Now I will say, this is the first time you get control of your character, and this is actually a pretty hard part to get through emotionally.
Michelle!
These days, even though I'm more used to realistic graphics conveying sad scenes, I find that somehow they were able to make this nearly as impactful. As you hear the screams of your wife and child as you try to get to them, it can be very affecting. And even though the graphics aren't super stark and beautiful, it still works. It's something I really appreciate about this game, that despite all the graphical limitations, it still tries to tell a compelling story and make us go through these emotions, and largely it works. Now, facing off against the intruders, I kind of ruin the vibe a bit as I keep pressing the jump button on accident to shoot, because on the PlayStation controller, it's R1 to shoot, not R2, which I've gotten so used to. But regardless, we find that our wife and child are dead. And so begins the life of Max as a vigilante. He goes on to join the DEA and go undercover, investigating the distribution of the drug Valkyr. Now, I should mention here another way that this game is seeking to overcome the graphical limitations of the time and still tell a compelling story is through these comic strip storyboards, rather than having 3D cutscenes, which will likely fail to capture much of the emotion from faces and ultimately be a more expensive way to tell this story. They decide to do much of the narration and storytelling through these comic strip panels, with Max grittily narrating the story throughout.
It was colder than the devil's heart, raining ice pitchforks as if the heavens were ready to fall. Everyone was running for shelter like there was no tomorrow.
It does work very well as a means of giving you the story and also keeping you invested in the actual actions you take during gameplay. It's an effort well appreciated in an age when it wasn't always required. But as I said, Max is undercover and seeking revenge for the loss of his loved ones. Here's where we start getting to the real action as we head to the New York City subway station to investigate. But before we get to that, let's talk about the combat and the controls of this game, because before I even started playing, before I even jumped into the story, I jumped into a tutorial section, which allows you to get a sense of the controls and get used to the way this game actually plays. And it does a decent job of telling you how the combat works. But one thing I had to be sure to do was to switch off the inverted controls on the camera, because this was completely ruining my aim and my ability to play. I was nervous that this might not have an option to toggle off, and I was afraid that I just wasn't going to be able to play this game. But I did find that, was able to turn it off, and finally was able to play normally. I know that this was kind of a default. These inverted control scheme could be a default a lot of times back in the day, but I really don't know how people can play this way. But here we continue to learn the basics. Now Max is always strafing, so wherever your camera is placed, that's where his back will be. You also have an action button to interact with items and open doors, and this will come in handy a lot more than we think. You do have a jump button, and if you jump backwards or sideways, you actually roll instead, and you can scroll through weapons, which are organized in various categories like melee weapons, pistols, shotguns, and snipers. Now, of course, there's gunplay as you have several guns to fire. And one thing I didn't realize right away, but it does become apparent as you play, is that you don't really have to aim too much in order to get your targets. The game is quite forgiving in that if you are just aimed in the general direction, you will still get bullets to ultimately land. The main exception here is being with a sniper and zoomed in, but these snipers are so cool. When you are scoped in and you fire a bullet that is on target, you will get this super slow-mo shot of the bullet traveling to the target and taking them out. It's so awesome and satisfying. Now, of course, speaking of slow-mo, you have bullet time. You can either perform a dive, which will slow you way down but allow you to keep firing and aim at a normal rate, or you can simply enter bullet time to slow your current actions again and fire at your targets. You have a little timer here which tells you how much bullet time you have, and this is one of the main mechanics of this game that you will be using a lot. And one thing I really do appreciate about Remedy games is something that I discovered now after having played other Remedy games like Alan Wake and Control, is that Remedy is always trying to put an interesting and unique spin on the third-person shooter genre with a mechanic that adds a deeper layer to combat. Like in Control, you have the telekinesis, and in Alan Wake, you have a flashlight. Here, you have bullet time, which will make for a lot of fun and a lot of interesting and unique ways to play. And another thing I should mention here is your health. You do have health, which is represented by red lines on your body, and in order to heal yourself, you will need to take a painkiller. These are things that you collect, and the painkillers only replenish a part of your health, and not immediately. It begins to slowly improve your health over time. So this means you will have to be pretty strategic when using these in combat. But now that we've got through that, we can get back to the story, which takes Max to a train station to meet his buddy Alex. But when you get there, there is blood all over the place, which is leading you to a dead cop. Something fishy is definitely going down. There are goons all around the subway, and they actually sound a lot like Joe Pesci or other good fellas you would see in these gangster movies.
Wasn't Jake supposed to take care of this?
He and Mickey are having too.
What the?
Might be a little cheesy, but I actually really love this enemy dialogue. Now, starting off, you only have a Desert Eagle, which is kind of the most basic gun you will get. And this offers you a chance to get used to the gameplay, and especially get used to bullet time, which is a lot of fun. And at this point, I'm not sure this is ever going to get old. Eventually, you do get a Beretta and a pump action shotgun to round off some of your arsenal. Ammo and guns can be picked up off of enemies that you kill, and honestly, this game keeps you pretty stocked up, at least on the normal difficulty. And it's only really sometimes that you run out of ammo for your favorite gun just because you're using it a lot, but generally you will have something else that you can use. Eventually, Max gets to a control room and he takes out some thugs, and this gets to something we will see a lot in this game, which is button pressing. Although it's not often very clear where the buttons are to press and what exactly it's gonna do, as is the case here. There is an exclamation point over your head when you get close, and that's kind of a good clue that you need to do something in the area. But here I just kind of pressed around and I pressed one button, which I had no clue what it was for, but mostly it was just spamming the action button until I finally got this camera view. It wasn't clear though at this point that I would actually need to backtrack, and so it took me a while to eventually find my way. I do figure it out though, as it seems clear there's nothing ahead of me, but I will say this is something that will happen often where you end up just walking around trying to figure out what you're supposed to do. It's not often that clear, and this is definitely in those early days before developers made a lot of conscious efforts to try to direct you towards the right path. Things like yellow paint with signs. There is a little bit of that in this, which we will discuss, but it's not really enough, and it's not really obvious enough to really give you the right direction. You really just kind of have to figure out a lot of these sections on your own. Now, what we did here with the buttons, which totally makes sense, is it actually allows Max to now operate a train, which he's going to do to ram into a wall and ultimately break the train down. Now, whoever is running this train station does not have their stuff in order. I mean, this is complete mayhem. The goons running around, you're just got vigilantes driving trains all over the place. I mean, back in these days, you didn't really need much of a logical excuse to get to the next section. And you could kind of loosely tie moments together in this way, and it was mostly considered okay. A lot of times developers these days really make an effort to kind of make things make sense, and some may see this as a criticism for me, but I do actually welcome this a bit, and I kind of wish more games these days were a little bit more offbeat like this and just a little more focused on having fun. These days there's just so much effort to justify character actions and choices that it can really take the fun out of the game. To be fair though, the lawlessness that occurs in the New York City subway system in real life makes what Max and the goons are doing here not actually that far of a stretch. But speaking of fun, we can now have some crazy fun because now I have two Berettas and I get to dual wield them, which is so satisfying. The dual Berettas, by the way, is one of my favorite guns to use, and you get it this early, meaning I'm going to be using it a lot, especially in bullet time. This is so fun. Make your way further, and it does crack me up that these enemies all seem to be voiced by the same exact voice actor.
Like Lapino. Now that's spooky.
Jack Lapino. Yeah, spooky. But also, it's like the failure count is rising.
What's funny too is when you take out multiple enemies, you can often hear the same guy say the same thing twice in a row like an echo.
The station's not secured.
Whack the sucker!
Moving forward, the subway has rats crawling all around, squeaking away. Gross, but immersive. I appreciate the effort that was put in here. More goon dialogue, and they are just absolutely wild.
All done here. Give me the detonator.
What are you talking about?
The detonator.
I thought you'd bring it.
You were supposed to bring it.
Yeah, right.
Now here we are clearing out a bunch of bank robbers, and so we do have a lot of chances to really experiment with bullet time. Just really getting a feel for it and making sure I have the right controls and taking them all out. You do have to look for another button, and this is again pretty hard to find, but after getting lost for a bit, I finally connect with Alex. And we find that mob boss Jack Lupino is behind all of this. But before we can talk, Alex gets whacked.
We gotta get out of here. If it's Lapino, it's... Alex? Alex!
There was nothing I could do. He was dead. I could tell by the empty, accusing stare of his eyes.
And it's clearly an attempt to frame Max for Alex's murder. Man, Max just can't catch a break. So you have to deal with some more goons, and ultimately you are able to finally get out of the subway, but this is once you're able to actually find the button to open the door, which takes a while until I find the very clearly labeled exit gate button to press. Finding your way through is gonna be one of the commonly more obnoxious things about this game. Once you escape, you do realize you're dealing with the mob boss, Jack Lupino, and you need to investigate further, especially as they have now tried to set Max up for the murder of Alex. So you go to this hotel, and this is where you find the Finito brothers.
Ladies and gentlemen, it's the pain in the butt.
Pain to the max.
You're killing me. Did you make that up yourselves, or you get some wino downstairs to come up with it? Don't answer that. A rhetorical question. I got something for the boss. Lupino around?
That kind of depends on who's asking. A friend or a junk squad plan. Don't answer. It's one of them, how do you put it, rhetorical questions. Lupino ain't here, but he says bye.
I cannot get enough of these accents. I mean, maybe growing up on a lot of these gangster movies and just loving these movies with like Robert De Niro, Joe Pesci, and the fact that we don't get these types of movies that often these days. I mean, it's just a pure nostalgia trip. Even though I haven't played this game before, this is bringing me back. But now we have to fight the Finito brothers, and they honestly don't seem to have much more health than anyone else. So we're actually able to take these loudmouth wise guys out pretty quickly with the shotgun. And here we get a clue that takes Max further, and it tells you that you're basically on the lookout for Rico Muerte, who's referred to as a regular Kaiser Soze. And this is a reference to the movie The Usual Suspects, which is an awesome movie, by the way. I highly recommend that to anyone who hasn't seen it before. But Kaiser Soze is sort of this big boogeyman or urban legend, this person that's so bad with such an infamous reputation that some don't even believe he can even exist. But after taking out the brothers and their goons, we need to get out of the building, which honestly, I'm having some trouble finding the exit. In the meantime, there's a radio here that confirms that Max has been framed. So yeah, we know he is now going to be chased by both the police and this gangster family. But yeah, how the fuck do I get out of here? This is actually going to be a running theme for me in this game. I mean, look, I know these days you get a lot of the yellow paint that tells you exactly where to go and kind of hold your hand, and I don't necessarily need that, but sometimes you do need a little bit more clues. Finally, I do realize that you actually have to break the glass in order to get out of here, even though there is definitely a door right next to it that likely works just fine. Okay, go through, fight a few more goons as we continue through this building, and a lot of these rooms have hearts and stuff in them, and I'm too young and naive to really realize what's going on here. On the TV, you can see an overly dramatic romantic movie playing, and this is kind of cool to see. This is the start of something you see a lot in Remedy games, is the use of TVs and what's playing on them as sometimes Easter eggs, but also other times ways to advance the story.
But my lady, I must.
My lord, no! I forbid you. This cannot be. This must not be.
But why, my love? Why?
My lord, it is too dreadful. Do not force me to speak the words.
My lady, I beg of you, I must know. I would rather die than not know it.
Yes, my lord, we should both be dead, for this shame is too great for the living. My lord, I am your long-lost sister.
Go in this room and look, the bed vibrates. That's pretty cool. Okay, so go through this room, and this is something that can get very frustrating with this game. I was able to not have too much of an issue here, but this happens so much. So of course, Max is navigating through the corridors of these rooms, and as you do, you will often go through a door or go around a corner, and there will be enemies camping in the corners, often in the opposite direction that you are heading towards. And this enemy placement can really make playing through this game a little bit annoying and tough, because basically as you traverse, you feel like you always need to kind of look around every corner before advancing any further. There will be more examples of this throughout my playthrough, but often it's just these enemies are like these covert campers hiding in these corners, popping out when you least expect it. And it kind of just disrupts what I would think would be a more natural flow of the action that I think this gameplay is more intended to have. But we go through and we get to this guy Rico Muerte's room, where we find this letter.
Our investigation had turned up nothing to link Angelo Punchinello, the head of the Punchinello family, to Valkyr. All tracks had ended with Jack Lupino. The letter in Muerte's room was signed by the Don himself. It was the first hint that the Kingpin knew what was brewing inside his syndicate.
The trouble you got into after the Chicago screw-up. The Punchinello family bailed you out. You have been waiting for a chance to pay us back. One of our trusted boys has a monkey the size of King Kong on his back. And we need your special skills for backup on a major deal.
Collecting evidence had gotten old a few hundred bullets back. I was already so far past the point of no return, I couldn't even remember what it looked like when I had passed it.
Continue on and we blow something up, which ends up knocking a hole in the ground, which allows me to jump down and keep taking out the goons. There's this secret room that is used for taping and I get through there, but I am lost yet again. So I follow the fire exit signs thinking maybe that's pointing me to the exit, but to no avail. And what you'll notice is there's a perfectly good elevator button here, which you would expect maybe you could press to call down an elevator, but because this is not the elevator I'm supposed to use, it doesn't work. But we'll find out in just a few moments that the one I am supposed to use will work. And the problem with this is because I see that it didn't work here, I think it's not going to work if I try it elsewhere throughout the game. So that really helps keep you lost because of this inconsistency. Finally, though, I find the elevator. As I'm going through, I'm killing more goons, and I gotta say, the dual Berettas are so freaking fun to use. It just never gets old, and this is definitely my favorite weapon to use in this game. Finally, though, there are some clearer markers for doors. They have these green little lights over them, which help guide the way, and so I use that. But one of these has boxes in front of it, so I use a Molotov cocktail to blow through and get to the next room. A little bit more cool shotgun bullet time here until we're finally starting to close in on this Rico Muerte.
Chill with the guns. Trust me, you don't want to piss Muerte off. Gentlemen, let's do business.
But first I need a key, apparently. And I know I hear the voices, but I kept trying a bunch of the locked doors until I found a similarly marked door, of course last in my search, which is where I needed to go. Shotgun the few fools that were inside and finally make my way to Rico.
Rico Muerte, big-time hustler.
Who the hell?
It's that cop.
I'm able to catch Rico with his pants down, literally, like his pants are literally down, and take him out. Pretty quickly, actually, as I have noticed that the bosses don't seem to have that much health. In fact, it seemed like Rico's girl, Candy, actually had the most health out of all the goons I faced. Now, we do get to take Rico's Ingram, which is a full auto SMG type pistol, but is pretty short on ammo, but fun to use. I now have to go outside for a second and shoot through the glass from the roof in order to get down where there are a bunch of goons waiting for me, but I make quick work of them with a Molotov throw and a few shotgun pumps. By this point, I have learned to look for buttons, especially when I see a door marked exit, and sure enough, finding the button gets me to open the exit doors and out of there. And we are now moving on to Lupino's tenement building.
Lupino's tenement buildings were a seedy hangout for all kinds of sleaze. A liquor store, a pawn shop, a laundromat full of mobster bookies and loan sharks. The list went on. The how and why of it was a mystery to me, but they knew I was a cop. They knew I was coming, and they were going to get real trigger happy about it. I got to see Lupino's hangout all lit up. A bomb went off, turning snow into liquid gold. A pillar of fire lifted the remains of a car straight up into the air.
One thing I love about this game, honestly, is the atmosphere. The crime noir, it's really well written. It can be a bit cheesy at times, but I still love it. So we got the Russian mob here, and they are also fighting the Lupino family. And of course, these guys' license plate says vodka on it. That's not a stereotype at all. But Max is going to infiltrate while these attacks are taking place and continue to serve that sweet vigilante justice, but with the police also in tow and looking for him, as well as trying to investigate these attacks that are going on. Finally, enter where I'm supposed to, take out the guys, and they're stalking me up for sure, which should be a clue about the next section, where I do end up getting caught in this little room, in this little hallway, and it's really quite weird. It's very unclear what I'm supposed to do. You have some doors here which don't open, you have some fire and propane tanks. I'm completely lost. And so my first thought is maybe I just need to run through the fire, but no, that's not what you're supposed to do. Then I realized they did just stock me up with a lot of Molotovs, so maybe I can use that first on the door, but that doesn't work. Then I try it on the propane tanks, but I make sure to stand pretty far back for this one. What I didn't expect though was that I was standing right in the way of the chain reaction that was supposed to happen, and it blew up right in my freaking face. Okay, one more attempt, and finally we figure it out. At this point, I also realize here that I haven't really been using bullet time to its fullest potential. So it takes some time to practice, especially doing the bullet time dodges in the 4 different directions, having you dive differently each direction you choose. And this practice does help because it does allow me to do some epic moves in the next couple rooms. You know, I can honestly kind of understand much of what the hype about this game is. Bullet time alone as a mechanic is just so damn fun and interesting, and it can actually make up for a lot of the other issues that this game has. At this point, I gotta fight my way up the stairs with goons all around the corners, and well, just need to make sure I jump this gap, which I miss. So we do this again, and we make the jump, but very sketchily, and then we keep moving through more goons. While I'm going through, I make sure to loot as much as I can and get as many supplies as I can. As I'm making my way down, trying to get to where I need to go, I encounter some junkies who I did think were goons, so this ended up happening.
I don't feel anything. Not a thing.
I'm freezing my butt off.
This is a little section where we do get a little bit of a closer look at these junkies. They largely seem to be living in these tenement buildings, and they're definitely on something.
What? I think I'm dead.
The junkies, they mean no harm though. They're just addicted to the Valkyr. At the top of this building, I'm able to capture one of the goons who is going to let me into the laundry room with the password, which is John Woo.
Not so fast. The password. John who?
Come on. Oh, okay, John Woo.
All right. Come right in.
It's a trap!
And this is a direct call out to a clear inspiration for this game, and that is John Woo movies, often starring Chow Yun-fat and featuring hard-boiled detectives in a lot of these slow-mo shootouts with a lot of diving. It's very cool. Keep going through, and I've learned that windows are often where I want to go, and so we do a little bit of parkour. We find another TV, and this one is featuring some story about pink flamingos.
The flamingo speaks. He can speak here. It says,
mirrors are more fun than television.
That's mirrors are more fun than television. Somehow I know this, just don't ask me how. And the flamingo speaks again.
Hit threshold tolerant ancestors.
I have no idea what that means.
Yeah, me neither. I don't even know what I just watched, but this is kind of the classic Remedy strangeness that they like to do. It's a nice, interesting quirk that you will find in a lot of Remedy games. But I fight my way up to this guy, Vinny Gognitti, and this is where we get another reference to John Woo and Chow Yun-fat.
You're dead, Payne! What the hell are you waiting for, you apes? Kill him! Kill him!
With pleasure, boss.
Gognitti bailed. I made like Chow Yun-fat.
Now in the exchange, Max hurts Vinny, but not enough. He runs away, and here we have the workings of a super epic chase sequence. Now, this is an older game, so you gotta give it a little bit of forgiveness. You can't expect this to be like on the level of Uncharted when it comes to chase sequences, but at the same time, I will say there are some pretty bad flaws in this. Vinny is super parkour, so he is able to get away quite nicely, and Max has to try to get to him while fighting goons. Now, there isn't much urgency to this as you're not really on a timer. You just kind of need to move from room to room and cutscenes will play out as you get there. Regardless though, as you traverse, you still kind of get a little sense of needing to keep up. Now, finally, you're about to get to Gognitti, but then he jumps onto a moving train. And in order to get him, you're going to need to catch the next train by jumping just the same. But a clear jump off the edge does not work. And this is actually very frustrating as you end up needing to repeat the chase sequence from the beginning. And I mean, I had no clear understanding what I actually did wrong, but I try again, and this time I do it with bullet time to help me try to position it, but again, it's a fail. I really don't understand what I'm doing wrong here. We start over and I try to jump a little later as I'm further off the ledge. Nope. Finally, I tried just running straight off without jumping at all, and yeah, that works. Pretty frustrating to be honest, especially as from the looks of it, that wouldn't have actually worked, but why would you not want us to use the jump mechanic in order to jump? This is just one of those elements that really hurts the sequence as you need to very specifically do one thing in order to keep going, and the penalty for missing is quite severe. But the chase continues on the rooftops where Gognitti is a parkour beast. You get to follow him, trying to be a little parkour yourself and taking out goons along the way, but I am super low on health and I don't have any painkillers, which I don't know if I missed anything anything, but again, it's kind of annoying as you can't really go back. It doesn't seem like there's anything available, so if you start this sequence low health, you kind of are stuck in that position. Luckily, taking some cover seems to help, but I need to be super careful as I have plenty of ammo, but no health. But finally, we do find some painkillers. Now, painkiller economy in this game definitely at times feels a little bit imbalanced, especially in this section, and especially even after I heal, there's a lot of guys to fight and I almost immediately need to heal again. But somehow we trudge through, and this is where we get to another very frustrating section of this chase. After I fight through this area and after clearing a lot of the enemies, it's very unclear what I need to do. At the beginning of this little section, they do show Vinny going up an elevator, but that makes me think I maybe need to climb up the stairs and go up the levels. I mean, they don't really show you enough information about this area to really understand where that elevator even took off from. I have to roam around here completely lost with no health, and was trying my hardest not to have to do this, but in order to even get any further, I actually had to look up a walkthrough on YouTube, and I found out that there is a little elevator button on this column that you could use to call down the elevator that Vinny went up. Yeah, I was not happy about this. This otherwise is a cool set piece type section. Getting to chase a guy running through the rooftops, getting to be a little parkour, catching a train, all this stuff was very cool. But this very confusing lack of directions and very specific ways I needed to execute things, plus having painkillers not seeming to be spread out enough, in addition to whenever I failed, I needed to start back up again without much health. This all basically put a wet blanket on the whole thing. Something I don't think just being an old game is good enough to excuse. It's definitely something I would mark down regarding this game. But the chase isn't quite over yet. We have a few more enemies to get through before finally pinning Gognitti down. And by the way, on my way, I found this bed. Doesn't this look like the most comfortable thing to sleep on? But back to the chase, and we finally get Gognitti pinned down outside, and he's trying to get inside this door, but it's locked. We have some goons to fight first, but I decide I'm going to use the high ground to my advantage, picking them off one at a time. Finally, though, it's time for Gognitti, who does seem to take quite a bit more bullets than most of the bosses we've faced so far. And actually, even when you do defeat him, he is still alive, begging for his life. As a straight-laced cop, Max would have normally taken him to jail, but now he is a hardened vigilante, so as soon as he finds out where he needs to go, Gognitti gets Gognati, or something like that. Our next location is the Ragnarok. And this was the first tip off to me that there is going to be some references to Norse mythology in this game. I mean, the drug Valkyr maybe should have been the first tip off, or even his partner being called Alex Balder, but this confirms it. In fact, this game actually is flooded with tons of references to Norse mythology. Something clearly important to Finnish studio Remedy, and something they continue in their other games, especially with the fictional band The Old Gods of Asgard. We will be seeing a lot more of these references as we go. But Max arrives at Ragnarok and begins tearing shit up, entering a bar area where there's disco music blaring and some satanic looking icons and goons around every corner. It's hard to tell, but based on the graphics, it does look like some of these goons are dressed up like Catholic priests as well. Now, there are some of these areas where I need to peek around corners, and that is always a little bit frustrating, but overall, the combat in this area is very fun. I think part of it is the disco music playing, but also the combat areas are a little bit more open, where for the most part up until this point, we've been playing in some fairly claustrophobic corridors and hallways. I like that they have opened it up a little bit more, giving Max a little bit more room. But we make our way deeper into the club, and this is where I actually first discovered that the bat can be used to open boxes, which do contain things like painkillers. Would have been nice to know this beforehand. Now we fight up a long stairway with goons the whole way up until we finally are able to get outside onto the rooftops and then back into some rafters above where I just was. This leads us right back out where we have to keep walking around these very narrow roof beams, which don't always keep your balance. And this was a horrible mistake to make because I now have to fight all those guys again. But next time we take our sweet time, and then we have to fight back down the stairway into a backstage area where there's some band equipment. And this is pretty cool. Each of these items will make some noise if you interact with it.
Karaoke never was my scene.
It's a nice touch. There are also some pyrotechnics in this area and an opening to the backstage, and I bet you could have used the pyrotechnics to take that guy out. Now, as you go further backstage, you do need to control a few more knobs to help you traverse even further and further into the room where the real satanic worship is happening. It's very creepy, and it's actually made even more creepy somehow with the janky graphics. But what really takes the cake, what really makes it crazier, is the absolutely wild dialogue you start hearing.
The flesh of fallen angels! Come to me all! Astaroth, Beelzebub, Asmodeus, Baphomet, Lucifer, Loki, Satan, Cthulhu, Lilith, Ella! Blood to you all! Secret living under the skin of reality. I've seen it. The corruption of flesh. I'm the wolf, yeah! I am the wolf!
And as you go further and further towards the crazy voice, you finally get to the room where you have the Lupino boss fight. And this guy is a piece of work.
I've tasted the devil's green blood. It runs in my veins. I've seen beyond a world of skin, the architecture of blood and bow and arrow. Death is coming! She is coming, and hell follows with her. This is the twilight winter. I am ready to be her son. Her time is now, and all who stand in her way must die!
The boss fight versus Lupino is pretty hard. It's actually the hardest boss fight we've had so far, but it's not totally because of him. A lot of it is because he has his goons kind of endlessly pouring in. You actually have to take out a bunch before you can even get to Lupino, and this can exhaust you of some of your best ammo, although there is more lying around. The trick to this boss fight really is to hide behind the pillars, using them as cover, and to not forget about bullet time. Lupino gets pretty aggressive and he will kind of rush you, but when he does this, it's just best to get at him before he can get at you. Doing this allowed me to take him down. Now, after this fight is when we run into Mona Sachs, the twin sister of Lisa Punchinello, Dawn Punchinello of the Punchinello crime family's wife. Now, Mona is more of a femme fatale, and she and Max are quite aligned. She wants to take out Angelo Punchinello, the Dawn, who treats her sister poorly, and she also reveals to Max that he killed Alex and was framing Max. So just when it seemed like these two might end up working together, perhaps for the next mission, Mona ends up drugging Max's drink, feeling he'll probably just get in the way. With Max knocked out, this all leads to a dream sequence. Max is further haunted by the loss of his wife and child, and so he ends up running down these endless corridors, trying desperately to get to the sound of his crying baby. This actually very much reminds me of the ashtray maze in Control, one of the most epic parts of that Remedy game, by the way. And one thing that's cool about this is you kind of get to see the beginnings of this very interactive gameplay that Remedy is experimenting with and refines through further games. They're telling a story and immersing you in it by making you control the character as the story gets told. What would otherwise be kind of an impeccable, perfect experience here, at least for the time that this was made, is actually ruined as soon as you make it to this sort of blood maze. In here, you have to slowly traverse these narrow blood lines, which have a lot of sharp turns and even some jumps between gaps. Remember that rooftop section that I hated? Yeah, they basically made this into an entire level, but they made it even harder and darker and without any clue if you're going in the right direction. And when you die here, you need to start this whole maze over from the beginning. It's a real shame because you can see a bit of what they were going for here, having this immersive dream sequence playing out and going wild into the psyche of Max and having your gameplay unlock deeper and deeper layers into Max's mind. It's a very cool concept, and it's definitely something we see executed better in modern games. But the inclusion of this particularly hard and frustrating gameplay actually ruins the whole experience. I can appreciate the attempt, and I'm glad they didn't abandon this after this poor execution, because of course we do have some pretty well executed dream sequences and cool interactive moments like this in future Remedy games, but yeah, this was rough. After painstakingly making it through this maze so slowly and having it really taking you out of the immersion because you really have to focus on the gameplay, you finally get to more long corridors, but not before I realized that the entrance was just right there off to the side. The maze just took me around in almost this big U-turny loop. But yeah, so we get to more long corridors and continue with Max trying desperately to get to his wife and child. It's funny, they could have excluded the entire blood maze section from this, and it actually would have worked really well. But they probably felt like they needed some sort of gameplay section shoved in here to keep it feeling like a level. But so Max finally reaches his wife, and you think it's going to play out like it did in the beginning, but actually it shows him firing his gun as she is begging for her life, and it kind of makes you wonder, did Max perhaps go crazy? Is he concocting this whole thing within his mind? Before we can think about this too much, we are woken up and we are tied up and being tortured by Frankie the Bat Niagara with a bat. And this is another member of the Punchinello crime family. But after he has his fun, he ends up leaving, and also leaving his bat behind. It's at this point that Max is able to try to escape from the chair that he's tied to, and he is able to successfully do that. At this point, he has to make his escape with nothing except, of course, the baseball bat. Now, again, we have a room with a bunch of doors, and I try all of them out, especially the most obvious ones. But of course, the one that I need to go through is the most discreet of these doors. But once I'm through, we do have a challenge because I now have to use this bat to take out one of these guards and then steal his gun in order to try to build my arsenal back. And of course, that means I need to sneak up on him and close some distance. The first attempt works, but I do run out of Desert Eagle bullets pretty quickly and fail to melee this next guy. But with the next attempt, I managed to get an Ingram pretty quickly in order to take the rest of the guys out nicely. This also allows me to pick up a shotgun. And actually, after taking out only a few enemies and looting some of these rooms, I am able to basically stock back up to my original arsenal. Now, to be honest, this feels like a missed opportunity to have me slowly collecting things throughout the level and more slowly building my way back up, challenging me to rely on melee for a longer period of time or just a Desert Eagle for a little while could have allowed for some cool progression, and it would have been an interesting way to see how my skills have improved since the very beginning of the game when I had to start this progression. But instead, we really only need to melee one guy with the bat and then take two guys out with a Desert Eagle until finally I'm able to get back to basically where I was. And all this took place in about 2 to 3 minutes. Regardless, I have my dual Berettas again, so I'm happy. Now we break out to the street and we make our way to a hotel where cops had been previously investigating, but now it's only Frankie and his boys with their cheesy gangster movie lines.
Just forget about it. Just forget about it. Hey, just forget about it.
I take these guys out, and then we find a radio where we hear that the news is reporting Max is actually dead. They didn't think he would escape from Frankie, but this is Max Payne we're talking about. Now here is an interesting encounter.
Dang!
Get pooped on. But now to take on Frankie at the hotel bar. And I think this is the same bar where we took out Rico Muerte and his girl Candy. But afterwards, we end up meeting with Vladimir, one of the Russians from earlier. Now, the Russian means Payne no harm. Instead, he has a proposal. He wants Payne to get to this cargo ship in order to get some goods before Don Punchinello can. So now it's up to Max to infiltrate the docks. We start by going through these cargo bays, maybe is what you call them, and you even have to take out this little camper. But this leads to a little puzzle section where I clearly need to move this box away from the door. I thought you had to shoot the red barrels, but actually I should have known there would be an elevator to get up here. Operate the crane, move the box, and quickly take care of the goons that try to stop me before I can move on. But then we get to the next area, which is actually pretty cool because we have some goons outside in the snow and we have to navigate these larger areas and take them out. Of course, though, once I dispose of the bad guys, I am again lost as to what I need to do. And I'm starting to think maybe it's partially just me and not the game. But I realize eventually that this big yellow crane in the middle of the arena is where I need to go to move this shipping container. So we do that, and then we get the goons who are messing around on the job behind it, and we proceed. Now, here is more evidence that I am dumb. This thing was racing towards me, and I had no clue whatsoever. So this time I avoid it, and we get through the newly cleared path. And I've learned the lesson that I need to watch out for dock equipment now. Taking out the goons is a nice reminder of how much I love these dual Berettas. They are my favorite gun, but actually not for long, because after killing this guy, we get the sniper rifle. Now, I got to try this out in the tutorial section, and I was wondering when this would come back into the picture, and here it is. Now we have it. And I gotta say, I love this thing. This has a scope so you can fire from distance, and when your bullets land, this thing will give you some cool slow-mo action shots. But before we really get to take this for a spin, we gotta do these two little puzzles, which I quite like. First is this chain link door locked with a padlock where you can snipe it in order to unlock for some extra goodies. But the next puzzle is a little bit tougher. Here we have an environmental clue. We have this little sign telling us about the wheel blocks and how they help with the parking. I actually didn't think this would work, but I thought, why not? I tried shooting it at the wheel block for this truck, and lo and behold, this actually was the way to clear the pathway in order to get through. From here, we do finally get some sections where we get to snipe at some fools, and this is really satisfying. I mean, I could snipe all day. And actually, much of the remaining parts of this level are just chances for me to snipe a lot. But first, we have to get through this warehouse filled with goons. This section is actually kind of tough because the goons are camped up in random spots at times. Sometimes they're overhead, sometimes they're behind a crate, but eventually we get through for a super cool sniper puzzle section. In this section, we get to operate this cargo machinery that operates along these tracks and goes in various different directions based on the buttons that you press. All the while, you have goons up in these lookouts, so you have to snipe them before they can snipe you. You can even choose to travel to some of these lookouts once you kill the enemies in order to loot their bodies. When you progress a certain amount, you also got to deal with some ground troops who are at a distance, giving you more chances to snipe. This section was a lot of fun and really just a good way to have us using the sniper rifle, especially as all the enemies are at these large distances. I will say the scope can be a little bit misleading at times, especially dealing with some of the geometry that tries to get in your way, especially when you're trying to snipe around cover. Even if you are on target, and even if you do get that slow-mo, sometimes the bullet doesn't actually land. So just be aware of that. Regardless though, this was very fun. And finally, we make it to the end. Now, we just have one more warehouse to fight through until finally we get to the cargo steamer in order to secure the goods for Vlad. We get on the boat where they start sending goons at us, and we get to use some cool slow-mo bullet time in order to take them out. At this point, we can answer the phone and speak to none other than Don Punchinello himself.
Angelo Puccinello here.
Angie, tell me, how much the dime cost you? I bet it was more than his name.
Max Payne.
Right the first time.
You're dead, punk.
You sure you're not confusing me with Boris here? But you are right, of course. Pretty soon we should get together and have a talk.
You son of a...
Pissing Punchinello off was a dangerous game, but when people get mad, they make mistakes. I should know. That's where I wanted Punchinello, mad enough to trip over his own feet, preferably into a grave.
From here, we need to go further into the ship to get to the goods, and here there are a ton more goons and a beefy looking guy who I know is going to be trouble. Once I get here, I kind of just stay in the corner and pick off the henchmen first before trying to make my push for the beefcake, where I have to use a ton of stuff in order to take him out. I ended up hiding behind this little cover and lobbed grenades at him until finally finishing the job. And my reward for all of this? A ton of supplies, including the epic Colt Commando. Did I say the sniper was my new favorite gun? Well, not anymore. This rifle is awesome, but we can't use it just yet because first we need to meet with Vlad now that we've secured the goods. And from here we get in contact with the Don and arrange to meet him at his restaurant in order to cut a deal. Okay, so upon my arrival, it becomes very apparent that this was a trap by the fact that the whole restaurant is currently exploding around me. But The problem is, well, the usual problem I have, and that is, where am I supposed to go? Eventually, I find the door I'm supposed to go through, and this time I make it quite a bit further, but it's still pretty hard to find out where exactly to go. I mean, I do kind of have to determine the pathway basically by figuring out where the fire is and where the fire is not. Get to another checkpoint, which is nice, but I then get confused again as the way I know I'm supposed to go is there, but I still get lit up. Realize what I need to do is pause a little bit and jump on the fallen shelves, but then I need to dodge a propane tank. Oops. Get through it this time though and take out the goons that are just chilling in this burning building. This was still a pretty cool set piece moment. It was a little confusing, but fun. Go down the sewers to escape, and I forgot to mention I have been using the Colt Commando this whole time, and this is awesome. So powerful and accurate. Love this thing. And at this point, I do have a little bit of a confession to make. I never actually learned what I need to press in order to reload my guns. Usually your gun will auto reload if you fire it until it's empty, but now, especially as this game is getting harder, I realize I need to make sure I know what button to press so I can be stocked up at all times. Escape the sewers and Vlad is there to rescue me. Nice. Now, since the Dawn refused this peace treaty, it's now time to take it to his own home. But Max knows if he wants to get to the Dawn, he will first have to get past the trio. Now I go into the room, and on my way in, look at this camper. Just look at him. The enemies, by the way, seem to be getting harder, and they are ready for me and often camping and will hurt me bad if I can't hurt them first. And very quickly as we enter the manor, we run into the trio. Now I assumed the trio were specifically these three guys in this room that I was facing against, hiding behind the table, because Max had just said that he found the trio. But actually only one of these three guys is a member of the trio, and the other two are just regular henchmen, so that was confusing. But anyways, I take them out, doing so by just slowly opening the door and firing back and forth. After they're done, I then move forward with some more tough henchmen, and look at this guy hiding in the bush. Finally, though, I get to the second member of the trio, where in this room there are also three guys, and they're just kind of off in this corner, so I have to sketchily bullet time jump into the door. What kind of trio are these guys anyways? Why don't they hang out in the same room? Anyways, across the hall is who I thought was the final trio member, so I decide to snipe one and get the other two. These guys apparently hang out in trios, just not with each other. But after taking them out, we see Lisa, or is it Mona, lying on her bed, dying. Max was too late to save her. But up there, Max gets a mysterious phone call from this guy named Alfred Woden, who is a Norse reference to Odin. And this guy is warning Max about a helicopter that's on its way to him. After this, though, we actually come across the real last member of the trio. Yeah, that other trio that I thought was part of the real trio is not a part of the trio. And this trio was actually part of the trio that I was looking for. But so we take them out, and finally we get to Don Punchinello, who is now surrounded and admits he isn't even the top dog. This whole Valkyr scheme goes even higher, to someone in the government. But before we can get the Don ourselves, 3 agents barge in and kill him. And then we have to take these guys out. And frankly, we are pretty lucky to do so, as these guys are loaded. But when we get to the next room, this is where we find the real top of the chain.
I was outgunned. It was time to take another beating. The mystery witch was a real barracuda. Trouble on dagger heels, a smoking assault rifle in her hand, and an army of killer suits behind her.
How sweet. I get to kill 2 birds with 1 stone. Mr. Payne, it's time to show you the benefits of my brew. Be a good boy now.
You'd find that Lady Luck was really a hooker. You were fresh out of cash.
Gentlemen, we're done here. Take me to Cold Steel.
She had just given me an OD of Valkyr. I could feel green fire eating my brains. They turned to steam. They did a fade on me. I'd never had a chance. The witch had got me just as sure as if she put a gun to my head and pulled the trigger.
after catching Max, they drug him up. And as usual, when we get drugged up, we get to a little trippy dream sequence, reliving the trauma of the night Max lost his wife and child. But this time it seems that we don't have to traverse a crazy blood maze. Or do we? Shit, we are still in the dream. Son of a bitch. Okay, now this time, guess what? Instead of just needing to walk on the narrow pathways, we now have to execute these perfectly timed jumps down from higher elevations. And the gaps themselves are even longer. I mean, who thought this was a good idea? And again, here, when you die, you have to start over from the beginning. At this point, I just sit here and contemplate my life as I try, but ultimately fail to get these jumps right, especially since I can't really get a good grip on the distance. And this time, by the way, the other door isn't even close. I can't even see it like I could have last time, so I don't really have any more clues on what the right way is to go. And this time when Max dies, he screams, and I basically was making the same scream of frustration whenever this happened. Eventually, I do find a little blood circle that I'm supposed to get to, and I almost missed the jump, so that was sketchy. But we do make it, and this gets even more confusing as we see Max needing to fight himself. Perhaps this is telling us that he is somehow schizophrenic, or maybe he feels guilty and responsible for the death of his wife and child. This little cut scene that plays afterwards doesn't help, as the killer reference looks like a blurred out Max Payne. But either way, Max wakes up from the high and with only one clue. He heard the mention of the cold steel foundry before he passed out. I'm not sure why these guys didn't confirm the kill with Max, but no time for questions. It's time to infiltrate the plant. Infiltrating the plant has me first climbing a ladder and then blasting through the roof where there are lasers throughout blocking my path. And these lasers, by the way, will trip explosives. You don't want to fire at these too close either because they will get you. Now, you don't start with much here, but you do get a sniper and a cult commando pretty fast by taking out the first set of goons. The guys here seem to be pretty elite. They will roll around and chuck grenades at you, so you gotta be quick on your feet if you want to survive. Now, this is dumb, but I did want to see what would happen if I jump in here, and yeah, it's about what you would expect. Now, I also found this room, which I'm sure contains a secret or some good stuff in it, but after trying to jump on these rocks and failing, I figured it's not worth trying again because dying just sets you so far back. This time we skip the room and we go deeper and take out more guys in these back rooms where I clearly need to cross this area, but the correct way to do this is not very clear, so we kind of cheese a jump. Although this may have actually been the right way, it just didn't seem very obvious. Keep moving through, and the Colt Commando is really awesome, by the way. It just mows these guys down. I love using this gun. Here we find a radio where we pick it up and we hear that the enemy knows I'm here, and they're ready to destroy the evidence of corruption and crime. Go further and look at this guy camping behind a door. So annoying. This game now has me blasting my way through a lot of these spots. Tossing a grenade in with the lasers can be a great way to clear them though. Now we also have to dodge some flames as well as watch out for more campers. This room was rigged with explosives, so you really need to narrowly traverse, and okay, I fell. Also, you can't cross this apparently. I didn't see the sign and I didn't really see evidence of flames, but yeah, this killed me, and good lord, this took me so far back. This time we try not to fall up here, but I realized there actually isn't anything up here. So on the bottom floor, we see if we need to try to cheese the crossing again, but then I realized there's a little button to extend the bridge. Get to another room where part of the rafter collapses, and after fighting the guys, I am absolutely confused where to go until I realize I might be able to jump to the part of the rafters that was hanging down, and this is the correct path, but I barely make it, and it still doesn't really make a lot of sense. It seemed like I was just lucky making that jump, but I get to go further, so I don't question it anymore. Now we also get to pick up some M79 ammo, and this is kind of like a rocket launcher that we get from time to time. We also have a bit of a puzzle here. We have to operate this machinery, and this ends up damaging this door ahead, but it doesn't fully damage it. And so it does kind of make sense that I should try to maybe grenade the door and blow a hole open. And this actually works, but the hole isn't big enough for me to fit in it. I even try to make it wider with another grenade or even my M79, but no, it doesn't work. So now I am totally lost. I even try to clip through the wall, thinking maybe it was somehow a glitch, but that doesn't work either. Eventually, I figured out this is what I was supposed to do. Just shoot at it. The bomb, M79, didn't open this at all, but a bullet did. I'm pissed. And what pisses me off even more is this camper. I mean, look at this guy. The camping in this game is not great, and it does kind of get to you, especially as the enemies get worse. But the next room is interesting. We have these hot coals, we have fire and molten metal all over the place, as well as lasers. But there is this cart in the middle. So what I need to do is launch the cart, which will push me along the tracks and through the mayhem. But I need to make sure I shoot the lasers as we go. And we even have some goons pop up at the end that I gotta take out. Now, this is kind of a cool idea, but it's just very short. Like, it would have been cooler if you had to stay on these tracks going through several rooms, kicking out lasers and fighting guys along the way. But this is the early 2000s. Not sure that I should have expected anything too elaborate here. But after we get to the end, the guys that I end up facing are a little bit hard to deal with, and I keep dying, so I guess that keeps giving me a chance to ride the cart again. Finally, I am able to get through and deal with these last two campers and get to the next room. It's starting to get pretty annoying, needing to check every angle before opening a door and constantly being confused on where they're shooting me from. But I think this is part of the intentional design of this game. They have too many enemies hiding out in the most inconspicuous places. It's more of a feature than a bug. I'm not really a fan. I also get pretty lost in this next room. We have a bridge like we did last time, and I think, okay, I'm gonna press the button to extend the bridge, but it only partially expands. So now I think maybe I need to jump it, but that is not the answer. So yeah, back to the train cars to do this all over again. And the next time I just don't have any idea what I'm supposed to do. I tried jumping on these little moving platforms, but that didn't really seem like a solid plan as they're clearly too hot. So instead, on my third attempt, I decide I guess I just need to cheese this side again. And maybe that's the right way to go, but it really doesn't feel like it. Either way, that gets me across. But now I have tripped the alarm. So it's time to get to the elevator and go down to where these agents have decided to execute Operation Deadeyes.
You can't do this! My men are still inside!
Do you have any idea why this is called Operation Deadeyes?
I think he's dead already.
Let's do it.
Attention all personnel. The self-destruction sequence has been initiated.
These guys have initiated a self-destruction sequence to the building, and so now Max needs to get out, but not before discovering one more clue about what is going on.
There was an old army bunker under the steel mill. I knew the military plaque on the floor. I had seen 1,000 variations of the insignia on crumbling brick walls everywhere in the city. The sword replaced by a syringe. Project Valhalla, V for Valkyr, V for Valhalla. All of a sudden it read like a crackpot conspiracy theory.
Project Valhalla, another Norse reference. But we gotta move through trying to escape until we get to this airlock where I clearly need to proceed, but first I need to find an elevator and rescue a scientist who is going to help me get through. All the while the alarms are blaring and we have to run into evacuating goons. Once the scientist lets me through, I think he dies. In this room, I've got a series of lasers blocking the floor. I have to clear the path and then up the next elevator, back through another airlock, and I get a little bit confused as to what to do as the door is budged, but the countdown is happening, and I really gotta move. Quick on my feet, I shoot the lasers, and that blows the way forward. Finally, I get to the escape elevator where the strangest thing happens. I'm making my way up, and part of the explosion occurs as I'm going up, but rather than finishing the sequence, I instead fell through this grate in the middle of the elevator. So then I got stuck in the elevator shaft. Nice. this. I eventually realized I was not in the right place, so I tried to blow myself up to start again, and well, for some reason, nothing was working. I was actually a bit scared here that maybe I would get soft locked, but I was able to try again from the main menu. This time I stay far on the edge of the elevator, and yes, we do make our escape successfully and with a badass little cutscene.
You piece together a jigsaw, and the final picture is you finishing that same puzzle. A mad, green-eyed killer standing behind you. An urban legend come true. The Project Valhalla test subjects had been the mad junkies who had murdered my loved ones. The rest was simple body count math. It all pointed to her. Ms. Valkyr. The factory went up in a fiery inferno behind me. All my leads were dead, turned to smoke and dust. I had lost my way. I hadn't slept in a million years.
After this part, Max is set to meet up with BB, and I had to look up who this was because it seemed like you should know who it is. And this is Alex's partner. But Max knows when it's time to meet him in the garage that he is a traitor. BB is able to make an escape though, and leaves Max in the biggest parking garage known to man with an endless wave of goons to fight. As we go down the levels, each one is just so similar, and honestly, it's a little bit boring. I know this is how parking garages are laid out, so you can't expect too much, but this does feel a bit endless and samey, not to mention you do have a lot of campers to deal with here. Now, there are some pieces of excitement here, like they do have some cars trying to come in and take you out, and some of them explode, and otherwise this is also a pretty decent section to just have some fun with the combat and the bullet time. But yeah, it's just a bit long. Now, at some point in the middle of all this, you do get to hear a radio where the news now has declared that Max is still alive. So that means the cops will be coming for you eventually, but the fight continues. Once you near the end, you also acquire this weapon called the jackhammer, which is a super strong shotgun that blows enemies away, but it is a bit annoying, honestly, that you only get this at the end of this entire sequence. It would have been cool to have received it a little bit earlier to try it out. But regardless, we have a payphone to answer where again we hear the voice of Alfred Woden, who wants us to meet him at the very on-the-nose Asgard building.
Mr. Payne, I would like to introduce you to my colleagues in what we call the Inner Circle.
You've been watching too much X-Files.
You have seen the files on Project Valhalla. We can fill the gaps, provide you with the information missing from those files. We were all involved in the early stages of the project during the Gulf War.
What's the catch?
We would very much like to blow this thing wide open, but our hands are tied. Her name is Nicole Horn. She was the key figure in Project Valhalla. When the funding was discontinued, she simply refused to quit. She knew exactly what she had in her hands. Nicole Horn is the president of Acer Corporation. She has more than half the city in her pocket. This must be kept under wraps. If you try to go public with this, we will deny any knowledge. We need you to take her out. Afterwards, we can protect you, make all the charges go away.
One thing to note is Woden does have an eye patch, just like Odin, and he also mentions the Aesir Corporation, another Norse reference. Before we can get more info from this guy though, the killer suits come by and blow the place up. It's now time to traverse this building, taking the enemies out. We start in this underground cellar type area with commandos pouring in, and we do get to try the jackhammer a little bit more, but I don't really love it. I'm not really a big shotgun guy, to be honest. Get to this monitor where you can see Woden is still alive, having survived that blast, and so apparently he is a bad guy. And look, I don't think this game has like a plot that has to totally make sense, like the badassery of Max kind of covers for a lot of that, but like everybody ends up being the bad guy. Anyways, from here we need to fight corner campers all the way up the stairs, and these guys really like to surprise you with grenades. And this particular death really pisses me off because it has me starting basically the entire level all over again from the beginning. This time up these stairs I'm a little bit more careful, and turns out I was just a hair away from the checkpoint. But now we have some cubicle action as I reach the office level, and look at this camper. Back out to the hallways, keeping on my way until I find a videotape blackmail from the boss, Nicole Horn, against this inner circle. We also see blueprints for the Acer Corporation headquarters, and this will come in handy as the next place we will need to head. But first we need to make our way out of this building. Back down the stairs, we take out a ton of campers and back to the cellars where I need to surgically remove the lasers. We now have arrived at a heavily secured bunker of some sort, and we take these fools out. It seems to be where all the secrets of the inner circle were kept.
Project Valhalla had not been the only thing the Inner Circle had been involved in. There were rows of cabinets full of files. The Serpentine Secret Society went back a long way, always pulling strings from the shadows. I couldn't say I was sorry. Woden's move in some Byzantine power game had cut the Circle's membership roster to 1. The old man wanted me on cleanup duty. It was my mess too.
Blow up these cabinets and this creates a domino effect that allows me to make it to the upper level and into the library where I have to face even more goons. Destroying this column also allows me to get further upstairs and head out. At least in this building, the doors marked with green clearly indicate that I can enter, and the doors marked red indicate that I can't. Go through a few more rooms and then I get to this circular room with a bunch of levels, and I can see that the exit will be at the bottom. We find the green exit door, and that leads me further down as I take guys down that are trying to get the jump on me. Make our way down one more level, and finally on the bottom floor we need to get past these guys.
CIA, FBI, you've seen one, you've seen them all. Sure, good for a practice run. But this, working for her, oh, this is the real thing. The money's astronomical. And best of all, you get to kill any scumbag who gets in your way. License to kill, like James Bond.
Nice speech. Now for the grand finale of this level. Just at the exit, there are a bunch of guys waiting for me, but they are no match for Payne. We get through and we're finally out of here.
I took my time cruising around the city in the snow. There was no hurry. I knew what I had to do now. I took my time thinking about it, building up the rage. When I was ready, I parked the stolen wheels at the front entrance of the Acer Corporation headquarters. Got out, got in, got cracking. I had a bullet with Nicole Horn's name on it. I had 10,000 bullets with the hag's name on them. She had ultra-high-tech security systems, enough mercenaries and weaponry to start World War III. There was no fear.
It's time to end this thing. We have now headed to the Acer headquarters, and we know things are about to get real, especially recalling back to the very beginning scene of this game. Almost immediately, the alarms go off, and the goons are out in full force to get you. This is going to require everything I have learned so far in order to get through. And by the way, this area, and really the whole level, reminds me of the sequences at the end of the first Matrix movie, which of course is the part where they make good use of bullet time themselves. I use the columns here as they are perfect for keeping safe and planning my next attack, but I definitely wasn't ready for these guys on the rafter. I have to use a sniper against their rockets, so it's a bit tough. And these guys, by the way, have me using up a lot of my painkillers. Fight up the escalators for a bit, being as careful as I can along the way, until we get to a room with a lot of lasers, but no bombs this time in order to get rid of them. So I need to carefully dodge them instead. And I should have known there would be campers. I'm ready for him this time though. Luckily, we end up finding quite a bit of painkillers along the way because I am going through these like crazy. Now we run into Mona here, who was actually working for Horn. Like everyone is like a double agent here. Can't trust anyone. But apparently she's not loyal enough to follow the orders and kill Max. Unfortunately though, she gets offed before they can unite and finish the job together. But her body does end up disappearing, so maybe she is able to get away. Who knows? Anyways, Max continues up the elevator, and what I didn't realize here as I'm trying to dodge these lasers is that it doesn't seem like I'm supposed to do that this time. Instead, I'm supposed to be shooting at these lasers, and this is actually kind of annoying because they just had this section showing me a mechanic where I had to just dodge the laser beams as they came, and it made me think I needed to do that here as well. This time though, I make sure to bullet time and shoot the lasers on my way up. We get through a room where we are able to unlock the elevators so we can get to the main frame. And this section is kind of cool. As we take the elevator down, a chopper comes trying to take us out, and that forces us to have to jump to the next elevator midway through in order to survive. In the next room, though, there is a lot of mayhem because we get a ton of goons in here. Now, as usual, I'm pretty lost on what to do, and this is kind of annoying. I figure maybe I need to jump on these hanging lights and use them as a bridge to get across, but that is not the answer, and I do die from fall damage, so I have to try this again. And then I realize that I need to blow up these servers or whatever in the mainframe room, go back up the elevator, and continue taking out dudes. At this point, we do have Horn's computer with all the files and secrets, and Max decides to destroy it by shooting the monitor. I don't think he accomplished his goal, but either way, it's time to get Horn.
Valkyr had been meant to be a white-winged maiden that would lift you to a warrior's heaven, but it turned out to be a one-way demon ride to hell. The devil was in the drug. I knew. I had met him. And now I was gonna kill her, the queen of the underworld who had tried to lift herself a bit closer to heaven with her drug money. No begging, no bribes. She knew better. Honor among killers. We who were about to die. Both of us knew how this would end, in pain and suffering.
All this because your wife stuck her nose into things that were none of her business.
The cops were coming to take me away. The sirens were like a bad conscience I couldn't shake.
It's ridiculous you've made it this far. You won't be alive when they get here.
Now, yet again, we have another section where I have no clue what I need to do. We have a room with a bunch of goons to take out, and they are pretty tough as they're packing a lot of heat, and there's not much room for me to work with. But once I take them out, this helicopter starts attacking from the windows. Now, if you were to ask me what I actually needed to do in order to get this helicopter to leave and let me advance, I really couldn't tell you. I just kind of fired at it a bunch and just tried to stay alive until ultimately the doors closed and it went away. What makes it very frustrating is when I fail the next section where I need to temporarily jump outside and get on this ledge, I end up falling off of it. So now, clueless on how to get through the helicopter, I just end up dying a bunch until I end up doing whatever it is I needed to do in order to let the helicopter go away. And this time, although I'm trying to be careful, I missed the ledge again. Helicopter again, and ledge again, and actually almost fall again, but just run through, ignoring the helicopter and just hightailing it to the next room. There are yet more goons to fight, but we are almost there, and finally I make it to the roof where we know that the real stuff is about to go down. Horn is able to run to the chopper, and I realize that they kind of gave me a decent clue this time as to what I need to do. They show this antenna really struggling and the cables buckling around because of how windy it is. And so this is a decent clue that I'm going to need to shoot these down. The first cable is a little bit tricky to get, and the other one I really struggled to find the right angle for. This all really slows me down, and you do need to go sort of fast or you will fail. And that's what ends up happening as I end up getting lost trying to find the next one. And this is actually kind of a long cutscene just for me to die. This time though, I get the first wire and I kill all the guys, and then I realize I just need to jump out a little bit here and get a good angle on the other wire so I can snipe it. With both of those down, I'm finally able to shoot the antenna with my M79, and this happens. Max has prevailed, and so here we are back where the game started.
They were all dead. The final gunshot was an exclamation mark to everything that had led to this point. I released my finger from the trigger.
We get captured by the cops, and we see Odin as we're heading into the police car, but this is where Max Payne ends. With a subtle hint that not all is over, but some satisfaction on Max's face that he did obtain some solid vigilante justice in this journey, and this is where the game ends. So, after all of this, how good is Max Payne? really? Well, certainly this game has its flaws, some of which are limitations that video games just had at the time, but some parts I think deserve some justified criticism. Many sections in this game felt unclear and confusing as to what I actually needed to do in order to clear them. And that kind of messed with a lot of the flow of this game, for sure. Especially when failure for not properly understanding these things sent you back pretty far. Another aspect was enemies at times could be very annoying to deal with, especially with their tendency to camp and come at you from angles you weren't expecting. This also ended up interrupting a lot of the flow of gameplay. And also, there were sections that just really felt well-intentioned but failed to realize their full potential. Despite all of this though, you do have a compelling story here. It's a lot of cheesiness, but welcome cheesiness, the kind that takes you back to 90s action movies and gangster flicks. And the bullet time mechanic, it never gets old. Jumping around in slow-mo, taking out dudes is so satisfying every single time you do it. And with some really cool guns to keep things interesting, like the dual Berettas, the sniper, and the Colt Commando. And Max Payne himself, despite initially kind of looking goofy, has solidified himself in my mind as a badass. Weaving other things in here like the Norse references, I can tell that Remedy put a lot of love and thought into this game. And so with all the good and the bad, I found myself a big fan of Max Payne. And I realized why this managed to shine despite releasing at the same time as all of these other classics. I think it may have a little bit too many flaws for me to give it a solid A, but I think it belongs as a solidly high B on my ultimate video game tier list. A great first outing with a lot of potential for a franchise that I am eager to keep playing, but one where I do hope to see some improvements made. But what do you think? Let me know down in the comments. And if you want to see my deep dive into Remedy's next property, Alan Wake, you should check this video out. And I want to say a special thank you to my YouTube members for supporting the Bowel Movement. And otherwise, so long, Pooper Troopers.